Eric DeCosta and the Baltimore Ravens wasted a golden opportunity at the trade deadline to improve their team, and new trade deadline details are being revealed. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage, and we have a lot to get into today. The trade deadline is come and gone. The Ravens, while they made a move for Dre'Mont Jones on Monday night, they made an Oestreicher trade that brought in Malaki Gilman, as well as they moved off of Jaire Alexander. Deadline day itself provided a whole lot of nothing for the Ravens as they made no moves, and a lot of details are coming out now, and Eric DeCosta certainly, it feels like, has wasted a golden opportunity, so we'll dive into all of that, as well as if the Ravens have enough to make a run with their roster as it stands. Want to remind everyone, today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Here with me today to dive into everything, it's former Ravens receiver, Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail of Missile Training and MissileTraining.com, as well as the Locked On Ravens Squad show. And Q, I know that seeing some of the moves from me personally, it was a little disheartening, especially the Quinnen Williams one. I know you were the leader of that Quinnen Williams hype train here, and you were saying that's the move, that's the move. Well, the Ravens, I think we all were hopefully anticipating. We were hopeful that they'd make another move outside of Dre'Mont Jones, but again, deadline day turned up not a lot. In fact, nothing for this Baltimore Ravens team, who I think are taking a pretty big gamble and wasting a pretty golden opportunity.
Well, I think the story is not yet written as far as whether or not this is going to turn egg in their face, or if it's going to be a situation where they're going to look back and try to tell everybody, ha, see, we told you so. We had everyone we needed on the roster. I think from a bigger picture standpoint, what we've seen on the field is that they don't have everybody that they need on the roster, that they do need to do a better job of acquiring talent. But now that the trade deadline is over, there's really not much we can really look at and say, wow, you know what, there's some special street free agent that's going to come in and be that guy. So Lawson, welcome to the club, and let's see what you can do. And we hopefully Dre'Mont Jones, hopefully he too will be able to do what he does with regarding making an impact on his team and pushing his team to where we think they can go, which is first they got to get to 500, and then they got to take care of business in the AFC North, or AFC, the AFC North. What am I thinking? The AFC North, and go ahead and get into the playoffs.
Let's start here, Hugh. The Ravens trade deadline haul as a whole. They bring in Dre'Mont Jones, Malaki Gilman, a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick. Going out, it's Oestreicher, Jaire Alexander, a 5th-round pick that could become a 4th-rounder. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Plus 2 7th-round picks. Baltimore holds on to the majority of their draft capital. They only make the Dre'Mont Jones move in terms of a pure acquisition. What I mean by that is, the Ravens acquiring a player and only sending back out draft capital, not the OA for Gilman swap. Again, for me, it's a little underwhelming, but for you, I mean, I graded it on the instant reaction live as a D, as a whole. The moves themselves separately, I think, are fine, but as a whole, I just think it's pretty underwhelming. And in the chat, we got some Fs. We even got a couple F minuses in there for Steve Saunders. So what would you kind of grade Baltimore's deadline?
You know what? I think when we look at the totality of the first part of the season, 1-5, where were the holes? The holes were the fact that Malaki is looking at being out for the year and career-ending injury. Looking at Broderick Washington having an ankle Achilles. We're looking at Daniel Falele, Rosengarten, and Voorhees all, for the most part, playing subpar. So your run defense has been a struggle, and your offense literally has been hanging on by a thread. You get two teams, one in Chicago and then obviously one in Miami, where they're not exactly world beaters, although they came into the game facing the Ravens on a 4-game win streak, 1-game win streak. One game was against the Atlanta Falcons in the lead up to the Dolphins game, and they look like world beaters. Grading wise, what did we do in the totality? You should have made a splash move. Instead, you got some pieces. Now, again, Dre'Mont, his tape looks really good. I love how, from a stunt aspect of things, they do some stunts, and that dude plays fast and looks great. Did it against the Raiders, where the Raiders aren't exactly the most stellar offensive line, but he also did it against the Chargers, and he did it against his own division opponents in the Colts. So there's some spark there, but ultimately, I would have loved to have seen them go for Quentin Williams.
It just feels like they're so stuck in their ways, and like you said, they're willing to just go down with the ship. It's their way or the highway. And when you're willing to go down with that ship and not kind of adapt new philosophies, like I get, the Ravens have had this long history of success, and a lot of that has had to do with the draft. They've had a lot of success in the draft. They've found a lot of diamonds in the rough, but at some point, enough has to be enough, and you have to find, because I think Jez Rebeck put it pretty perfectly in The Athletic, where it's like Baltimore the last couple of seasons, Q, it's been a lot of, they're in a pretty good position roster-wise, so they can use the deadline as a luxury to add a couple pieces and players that can help them maybe take them over the top on an already great roster in a great situation. The record is good or whatnot. This year, it felt different, where we had the Ravens win 2 games over the last 2 weeks, put themselves back in the conversation. And so for them, in order for them to truly have the best opportunity to dig themselves completely out of that hole, which they still have an opportunity with the roster they have, but to give themselves the best shot, it would have been a Quentin Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons. You address the D-line in some way, address the O-line in some way. And again, it's especially on the O-line, it's hard to trade for O-linemen during the season because everybody needs them and no one wants to give them up. But still, I don't know the details of the negotiations. I'm sure, Q, over the next handful of weeks or days or maybe even hours after we record this, maybe we'll get some reports of, the Ravens were in on this guy and this guy was close, but nothing happened. We'll probably get some reports and we'll talk about it at some point. But, I don't think the Ravens didn't try. I just think that they had a set price that they were willing to go for, whatever picks they wanted to give up. They saw the Quentin Williams deal with Dallas with the second in 2026 and the first in 2027. And they were just kind of like, ooh, that. And I never expected Baltimore to trade a first-round pick in the first place. I would probably expected Baltimore's, if they did offer anything for Quentin Williams, was probably around a 2 and a 4th or a 5th or a 6th or something. I don't know, something along those lines. But that trade for Dallas honestly would have made sense for the Ravens, Q, because even if the Ravens got Quentin Williams and didn't have a great end to their season, and that first-round pick for this upcoming draft falls in the teens, 10, 11, 12, whatever it may be, you don't have to worry about that because the pick is for next year. So you could replenish your roster, go on a run, have a better record. And I thought that actually, if there was a deal where Baltimore gave up a first-round pick, that one would have made sense. Again, I didn't expect Baltimore to do that, but those are just kind of the situations where it's not just about this season or giving up a lot of assets for a singular season of someone. Quentin Williams would have been in Baltimore for the long haul, I'm sure. Some of these other big defensive pieces would have been in Baltimore for the long haul. And, sometimes it is okay to lose a trade long-term to win it in the short term, to give you the best opportunity to win. And that's what I think is the most disappointing thing to me, is that Baltimore, they have not put themselves in the best position to win here.
I think if you look at from the drafting element of it all, there are knowns and there are unknowns. I think that Eric DeCosta, if you look at even his 2024 class, there were 9 draft picks, and I know they got rid of Sanusi Kane. And so looking at it, they got 6 guys, but even the contributors that is like a really strong contributor, you would have to say is Nate Wiggins, and that's it. I know, yes, Roger Rosengarten is a starter, and yes, he is doing his thing, and yes, hopefully he will have his he came out of the block strong. Let's say it that way. But then this year it was like, ooh, what's going on, bro? Like, what happened? So that's where, yes, the story isn't written yet. My point is, though, I mean, what did Adisa Isaac do? What has Tez Walker done? Tez Walker has had his bright spots, but he hasn't been the consistency that they need. You got Quentin Williams. You know what you're getting. You know you're getting that Roquan Smith-esque type player and then some. And you know you have issues on your D-line because 2 guys, one that you paid handsomely, the other you paid handsomely a few years prior, they're not going to be on the roster. Well, one we definitely know is not going to be on the roster in Matabike. The other one, we're not quite sure when he's going to be back. So, bigger picture, there is the miss because we keep looking at this like, Eric DeCosta, the genius. And is he? From a genius standpoint, like your draft has to be one where you're hitting it and not just guessing at it. And I think there are some misses there that he and his staff have to look at themselves in the eye with.
And we also got a word about the conditions on the Dre'Mont Jones pick because obviously Baltimore, again, it was a 5th rounder they traded, but it can go to a 4th rounder. And so the conditions on that pick, it's the Jets' 5th rounder. So that's going to be a pretty high up in the 5th round pick. Could be the first pick in the 5th round. But the conditions where it could become a 4th rounder is if Dre'Mont Jones, if he gets more than 2 sacks, it's 2 sacks. So the conditions are if Dre'Mont Jones has more than 2 sacks for the rest of the regular season and the Ravens make the playoffs, that pick turns from a 5th rounder into a 4th rounder. So that was a small detail of the Dre'Mont Jones trade. And again, the Ravens' 4th round pick, if they make the playoffs, would be, not too far separated from the Jets' 5th round at the beginning of the 5th round. But even still, Jones is a solid piece. He's a solid piece. But to put the expectation on him of all of a sudden being the savior of this pass rush because he's the only acquisition you got there outside of Carl Lawson, I think is decently unfair. And coming up, we'll talk about some more trade deadline details for the Ravens being revealed, as well as more conversations about the opportunity that we believe Eric DeCosta missed out on. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to 4th quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And for me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy, and in the NBA right now, over on FanDuel, the Nuggets currently have the 2nd best odds to win the NBA championship at plus 650. Only ahead of them is the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 200. And I'm liking those odds for Denver. I like their offseason. They're gelling right now. So I think Denver is in store for a really big run this season. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still rocking out with you here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Ravens, little midweek edition for you. No fireworks for the Ravens on deadline day. I mean, there were certainly fireworks across the league, especially if your team was the New York Jets, trading Sauce Gardner away and Quentin Williams as well. But the Ravens, they decided not to do that. And we talked right at the end of the first part of the show about the trade detail of the conditions on that Dre'Mont Jones pick. Again, if Dre'Mont Jones gets 2 sacks and the Ravens make the playoffs, that 5th rounder does turn into a 4th rounder. But the Jaire Alexander trade has also caused a lot of waves across the NFL, specifically within the Ravens fan base. Some people love it. Other people hate it. It's kind of both ways. But Howie Roseman talked a little bit about the Eagles' moves and, the deadline. And since the Eagles acquired Jaire, he was asked a little bit about that conversation and kind of how that all came to fruition. And he ended up saying that Howie Roseman said when Jaire Alexander signed in Baltimore, Roseman thought it was a great signing and they had honest conversations with Baltimore about the situation there. And he said, sometimes in this league, this is a quote, sometimes in this league, you acquire information and you watch everything and you say the risk is worth the reward. So I feel like we know Howie Roseman is aggressive. We know he's going to do anything he can to improve his team. I know a lot of people wish the Ravens were that way. It'd be nice to, have a lot of guys come in like that. But Baltimore, clearly, it's just different philosophies. But I thought this was really interesting and a really interesting detail because feels like this was something that ever since Jaire signed, feels like the Eagles were doing their homework on and feels like they were monitoring the situation. And they felt like if stuff had gone south in Baltimore or could go south, then they would have an opportunity to pounce on a player they feel like can help. And, Eric DeCosta is doing his research too. I'm sure he keeps tabs on guys as well. But this intricacy of just how detailed it can be to go and acquire a player is not just, how he calls Eric, hey, let's do a trade. Okay, that's it. This sometimes takes weeks, months to happen. And it's interesting because, again, the Ravens clearly Jaire wasn't in their plans. He struggled when he was on the field for them, the injury situation as well. But feels like Howie thinks he has a good player here in Jaire that will hopefully be able to help that Eagles team. And I know that if he does help Philadelphia in ways that he could have helped Baltimore, I'm sure the fan base would be thrilled. Yeah, not really.
Howie Roseman does the aggressive play well. Whereas I think looking at Eric DeCosta, he has a less aggressive play that he likes to do. He likes to have it all out in front of him and be measured. Whereas Howie Roseman is like, all right, cool. We know if we do our due diligence and we know if there's an aggressive move to be made that's going to benefit us now, I will worry about later. I think it's the opposite where Eric looks at the later and then thinks that the now will handle itself.
It's definitely different philosophies. And I think that for Baltimore, there needs to be more aggression. And there was actually a quote from Howie Roseman that sent a lot of Ravens fans into a frenzy because this is how they wish the Ravens would operate. Howie was asked about his reported interest in trading for Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett, some of those big fish names. And Howie Roseman said, quote, when there's opportunities to be aggressive for the right players, we're not going to sit on our hands. You don't have great success without taking great risks. We can't be afraid to fail. I think a lot of times for you to get to the top, you have to be willing to take chances that may look controversial at times. I won't live with regret. I think that it's a perfect mindset.
I love that quote.
It's great. It's awesome. And I think that for me, with us talking about the Ravens being so stuck in their ways and, me mentioning like it's okay to lose a trade long-term to benefit short-term, you do have to take risks. And sometimes it feels like the Ravens are a little bit too, I don't know if worried is the right word, but I think they're afraid to take that jump because they value draft picks so much. And that is such a key part of their identity. And the draft is great. Like it's awesome to develop guys, to be able to put them through your system, have players on rookie contracts that can help you at, a fraction of the cost of a veteran. Like all that is great and good. And they've had a lot of success and found a lot of success doing that. But things change, situations change, circumstances change. And I think this was a certain circumstance, Howie's been doing it for years in Philadelphia, but like this was one of those situations and circumstances where sometimes it's okay to sit back and kind of let things play their course. Like it's okay to do that. Other times you have to take that leap. And I feel like the Ravens, even though they went out there and they got a Roquan Smith a couple of years ago, they've made bigger trades than the ones they've made over the past couple of years. This was one of those situations where it felt like it was the right opportunity to be aggressive, especially with some of the uncertainty surrounding Nandu Madubuike. Didn't have to be Quinnen Williams. There are other guys available, but leaving with just Dre'Mont Jones and Alohi Gilman, while solid players on their own, as a whole, I don't think plug up enough of the holes that Baltimore still has to deal with.
And that's the thing. I think that's the calculated risk of, well, we need to win now versus trying to guesstimate what winning looks like later. I don't want to guesstimate what winning looks like later. I want to know now. I want to be in that position now where, we talk about like this, what this team is built for. Okay, well, did you really build it then? I mean, is it one of those scenarios where, you outthink yourself because your philosophy when you got a player and you got the draft capital to get them, like that to me is where I guess it's a little bit of a head scratcher. What are you really doing? What are you really trying to accomplish if those draft picks that you covet are so good? Then you wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. Odafe Owe would still be balling out. If you look at it, you would still have Devin Leary on the team and not going for Cooper Rush. If you look at, offensive line wise, you would have known, like, yeah, we can move off of Ben Cleveland and get somebody else that's going to be more stout and do what they need to do. Instead, you got a Jabo. Instead, you get, Adisa Isaac. You get, Emory Jones. You get injured players. You get Voorhees. Why would you want to move off of Zeitler? Like, you're concerned about his knees. Well, his knees are fine when he played in Detroit, and his knees are fine when, he's playing elsewhere and looking good. Like, all right. I just think that, bigger picture wise, if your philosophy is go through the draft, well, then let's look at your body of work and what has it produced for you.
And that's the thing where I think that the message that Eric DeCosta and this Ravens team has sent here is clearly they like their guys. That's the mantra and the message here that the Ravens are saying we like our guys enough.
Who are your guys though that you?
Yeah. Well, that's the point, right? Yeah, it's players that
I'm talking about like some strong depth, right?
Yeah,
like Kyle Hamilton is your guy. Hey, I'm tipping the cap to you, bro. Like that's awesome. Malaki Starks, it's too early to tell, but so far, okay, great. Off to a solid, strong start. But a Jabo is a miss. Adisa Isaac is a miss. There are some other players that have been misses. And so is Mark Andrews one of your guys? Yes. Is Charlie Kolar one of your guys? Yes. Is Isaiah Likely one of your guys? Yes. How about your center? Is he one of your guys? Yes. Your left tackle, is he one of your guys? Yes. But we still are looking at holes that need to be filled. You're looking at the depth of your guys. What are your guys from a depth aspect of things and the aggressiveness of getting somebody that's not homegrown? That's where I think the big picture for me looks at.
Yeah, and again, like the Ravens have superstar power. They do. They have it all over their roster. But football Q can be won or lost on the margins. Can the offensive lineman make a block? Can the defensive lineman get pressure on the quarterback on a 3rd down and 10 to force a punt? Can the safeties, bat down a ball or have the range to go over? Can a corner cover for 5 seconds on a huge 4th down play to maybe win the game? And so it's not a problem with Baltimore's superstar talent, but, you can replace all of those positions that I just mentioned with those scenarios with players. Can Daniel Falele not fall over on a block on a key 3rd down? Can John Jenkins hold up for a full season along with Brent Urban to give you quality snaps, right? Those are all things. And so it's not about like, for me, like I get it. You put it perfectly. It's like you have a lot of guys, like your guys on the roster, but it's about then continuing to add to that group when you clearly have holes. And we've talked about it, Q, you and I. There are also multiple stats out there. Jonah Schaefer, the Baltimore Banners, did a really good job illustrating this, especially on the defensive line for the Ravens. The win rate for Ravens rushers on true pass sets per PFF, this is coming from Jonas. Dre'Mont Jones ranks 48 of 93 of all edges. Immediately slots in as number 1 on the edge group. Mike Green, 62 of 93. Tavius Robinson, 82 of 93. And Kyle Van Noy, 93 of 93. Last for Kyle Van Noy. On the interior, Travis Jones, 29 of 95, interior defensive lineman. John Jenkins, 67-95. And Jonas put it perfectly. Dre'Mont Jones will help. His versatility on the interior, on the exterior, like it helps. But the Ravens, as he said, could use another boost. They certainly could have, especially because right now, Q, they're on track to be one of the worst rush 4 defenses in the entire NFL. Not only that, but entire NFL history. Since losing Nadu Madubuike, according to Jonas, the Ravens' pressure rate on plays without blitzes, it's NFL worst, 17.2%. Over the past decade, no defense has finished the season even below 20%. So there are a couple of other really big storylines from the deadline that I think the Ravens did miss out on. So coming up in the final part of the show, Q and I will dive into those as well as talk about if the Ravens have enough to win. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, the future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that with BILT, your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay. Whether I'm grabbing food at my favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, I'm still earning rewards. BILT has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still rocking out with you here on this Wednesday edition of the show. Again, thanks so much for being here. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. The regular show is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have bonus episodes in the weekend. We got watch-alongs during games. We have instant reaction shows for big news as well as right after games. Plus, Locked On Ravens Squad show twice a week. We're going to have that tonight. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Q is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Sam and Joku, he's going to be there as well. So be sure you tap in with us there. Sometimes even Ravens long snapper Nick Moore appears. So you're going to have to see if he checks in with us tonight on the Locked On Ravens Squad show. But Q, I think with the Ravens deadline, them not making a splash move, only bringing in Dre'Mont Jones and Alohi Gilman, just feels like they're holding on to those draft picks like they're the precious prizes of the world. And we said it last year, like 11 draft picks. There was no way the Ravens were having 11 draft picks make this roster. And I think that the Ravens, like with that Dre'Mont Jones deal, they let those assets work for them. And I thought that with them trading Jaire for the 6th rounder, that was going to be an option. They freed up some cap space. They had about $15-ish million to use and to play around with. And just really felt like they didn't use their assets to their advantage. Now, there are still opportunities for them to add on the free agent market, maybe a Christian Wilkins or Asante Samuel Jr., who's now reportedly healthy and ready to play as a cornerback. Like, you still have options to add, but it limits you in a lot of different ways. And we also saw like teams like the Bills and the Chiefs and the Steelers. Those teams didn't add anybody, or barely added anybody. I mean, it felt like the Ravens had an opportunity to put themselves even further into what is a wide open AFC, put them either ahead of a team like the Steelers or put them in the conversation with the Bills and the Chiefs. It just felt like they didn't do it.
Yeah, they didn't. I think from a bigger picture standpoint, Chiefs, I'm sure they're probably coveting their draft and trying to make sure that, hey, we are in a tough spot, but I think once we get to the playoffs, we'll feel like we're in a better position for ourselves. I think for the Bills, they're probably thinking, there's some interior D linemen that, we'd love to have, but they're not going to give away the farm. I'm sure the Ed Oliver loss was a drastic one for them, but I'm sure they're hoping that there's a possibility he would get back if he or if they can get a deep run into the playoffs. Pittsburgh, they're trying to secure a receiver, and what did they get? Marquise Valdez-Scantling.
Yeah, Marquise Valdez-Scantling.
Valdez-Scantling. He's on the practice squad right now, so it depends on what that looks like as far as bringing him up to the active roster. The teams that you're going to be facing are the teams that you're going to be facing, and they're going to be challenging you for sure. boy, I'm like, even if you look at it like the Patriots, they're not going to be a slouch. That's going to be a really good, strong contest as well. Obviously, when you look at the Jets, they now are clearing out everybody, so that's good. But they're still going to be where you're going to have to challenge yourself and get the job done in your division.
And I think the thing to keep in mind, especially with the Ravens, and we talked about how it felt more like a necessity than a luxury this time around this year. A lot of the reason why I felt that way is because, look, Eric DeCosta has made a lot of great moves for this team, but the reason they were in this situation in the first place has a lot to do with some of the moves he made or did not make this offseason, namely at the guard positions where there was no competition at those guard spots and essentially handed them to two either inexperienced or young players that hadn't earned. I mean, I said it on the live stream, earned the right to protect Lamar Jackson. And while neither of those guys did that, they didn't have the competition to do it against. And that is a fault of the general manager for not bringing in the proper competition. Like on the D line, it's been a tough year. Obviously, Matabike being injured, but some of the depth behind Matabike, hasn't stepped up like we thought it could. A lot of the depth pieces. I mean, the Jaire signing in itself was good at the time, but the Ravens knew that was a risk with the injury and didn't work out there. So there were moves that DeCosta made that were good. Like the DeAndre Hopkins move, I thought was good from Eric DeCosta. Some of the picks were good. Like, again, DeCosta didn't have this all-time terrible offseason, but there were certain moves that we could have avoided being in this conversation in the first place about, they need a guard so bad or they need this so bad because of moves that did or didn't happen. So, Q, do you think, like, officially, I know we've talked about it throughout the show, but with some of the holes on the offensive line, with some of the defensive line stuff, football's a game of injuries too. I mean, you're hoping this team can stay as healthy as possible, but another benefit to adding a guy at the deadline is that if someone does go down at a certain position, you have another guy to plug and play. The Ravens are talented. They have Lamar Jackson. They have star power. I'm not saying the season is over, but do you think that the Ravens after the deadline have enough to make a serious run, or do you think this might just be more of the same in terms of, maybe they'll make the playoffs, maybe they'll win the division, but are they true Super Bowl contenders to you at this point?
Well, I mean, the story isn't written until it is. I think the big picture of advancing in the playoffs, it's going to be incredibly challenging. Did you do enough? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. Daniel Falele is just automatically going to flip the switch and get it. Voorhees going to flip a switch and get it. I don't know if Roger Rosengard is going to be able to hold up on the outside against the TJ Watts. Again, like this is interesting times. This is going to be one of the most interesting seasons of the John Harbaugh era, based upon the fact that going into the year, you had a roster that was ready to compete for a Super Bowl. And now here we are fighting to get to 500 with some good teams left on the schedule. And you also got to figure out what it is as far as the weaknesses of your roster. Is it good enough to get through the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that there are going to be a lot of storylines written here for this Ravens team this season, how this last half of the year goes. I mean, the Ravens, they have a chance still. I'm not saying their season is over again, but I think that they just could have made it easier on themselves. I think that they did by adding Gilman and Dre'Mont Jones, but I'm saying like they really could have taken some pressure off their plate when it came to, the D-line or the O-line and just trying to shore up those positions. So, I'm sure, again, Q, we'll hear of some reports of the Ravens being in on a guy and the trade didn't work out. Maybe they made one trade with Tennessee. Maybe they were looking at another deal with them or Giants or Jets or I don't know. One, I'm sure there'll be some report somewhere, but we'll see how it all plays out. The Ravens have certainly made their stance clear, and they're going to ride it out with their guys. They like their guys. That's clearly the message that's being sent here. But Q, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on. Please, on the way out, tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, man. It's all about missile training. MissileTraining.com is where you can find me, locate, and communicate with me. Give me an understanding of what your needs are, whether you're trying to be an athlete, improving on your durability, your speed, and your overall kinesthetic awareness. If you are a human mover and you just want to move without pain, you want to function better, we got all your needs. MissileTraining.com. Of course, you can also find me on WJZ, the Purple Pregame Show. each and every week. Myself, Alex Glaze, Grace Grill, we break it all down for you. Of course, Locked On Ravens every single week. Kevin Oestreicher and I right here giving you all the news and the squad show. Squadding it up. Sam Njoku, Kevin Oestreicher, Qadry Ismail, there for you twice a week. Even after Raven games, our post-game coverage is like none other.
We have it all here on Locked On Ravens and the Squad Show. And of course, Q has it all too. So be sure to check out Q over at Missile Training and MissileTraining.com, WJZ. And of course, right here on Locked On Ravens. Links will be in the description below. Q, I appreciate you as always. Thanks for hopping on. And to everybody who watched and listened today, thank you for taking some time listening and watching the Locked On Ravens. Be sure on the way out, you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for that 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.